Attorney General Pam Bondi claims the DOJ released all the Epstein files and even listed out 300 names. But we're seeing blowback saying that is not the end of the story. So we're going to go through some of the notable people named to understand what exactly their connection is, if any, to the accused child sex trafficker.
The storm didn't start with thunder. It started with a document, a file, a leak, a name appearing in a place nobody expected. And suddenly the internet did what it always does. It connected dots.
Well, after Attorney General Pam Bondi's battle in front of the House Judiciary Committee last week, where she was grilled on all matters Jeffrey Epstein, namely regarding redactions and whether there were in fact other co-conspirators or not. In fact, we did a whole sidebar on that. Bondi then sent a letter out to lawmakers over the weekend, saying that all the Epstein files have been released. And most importantly, she listed out over 300 high-profile names. Now, at first glance, you might be saying, wait a second. Did she just release the Epstein list? The list of Epstein's alleged co-conspirators, people who allegedly engaged in criminal activity, the abuse of young girls for years? That's why we have to put into context what this is about, okay? Because I'm going to go over the letter, I'm going to go over the names and try to make sense of it. Because a few things here, as we have previously reported, the DOJ indicated that there is no central Jeffrey Epstein client list that he had prepared. There's no little black book for people who knew about or participated in criminal activity and that he kept as a form of blackmail. This is not surprising. I never thought that there was anything like this. There's no evidence of that. There is an address book that we've talked about here on Sidebar before. It's not the same thing. And to be clear, I'm going to say this over and over again, just because someone is mentioned in the files or mentioned in an address book doesn't mean that they knew about or engaged in criminal activity. So let me briefly summarize the letter and then I'll get into the names, okay? So in a letter that was dated this past Saturday, February 14th, this is addressed to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chairman Chuck Grassley, Ranking Member Dick Durbin, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, and Ranking Member Jamie Raskin. The letter explains that under the newly passed Epstein Files Transparency Act, the DOJ has to explain everything that was released. And remember, this was an act that said, you got to turn over everything in your possession. So one of the things they have to do under the law is they have to explain what was released. They have to explain a summary of all the redactions and the legal basis for them. And this is the key. Quote, a list of all government officials and politically exposed persons named or referenced in the released materials. Okay, they had to list this out. So first, some context here. Pam Bondi explained that they released all the files in their possession regarding 9 categories. Basically, anything about Epstein, anything about Ghislaine Maxwell, flight logs or travel records, associated government officials and entities, immunity deals, internal Department of Justice communications regarding not charging someone or prosecuting someone, anything about destroying Epstein data and materials, and any materials surrounding Jeffrey Epstein's death. That's basically a summary of what they had to release. Now, in terms of what was withheld from public disclosure, the letter explains that there are those records that were subject to certain privileges, like attorney-client privilege, but the letter made clear that no records were withheld that were merely just embarrassing to someone, and that they tried to remove personally identifiable information about victims, although, as I'm sure you heard from various reporting, there were allegations that the DOJ failed to 100% do that. And then we get this, quote, below is a list of all government officials and politically exposed persons named or referenced in the released materials, although the letter explains that politically exposed person, not really well defined. But there is a footnote of the list that says, any omissions from the list are unintentional and, as explained in the previous letters to Congress, a result of the volume and speed with which the department complied with the act. Individuals whose names were redacted for law enforcement sensitive purposes are not included, meaning if there's an ongoing investigation. Now, I'm not going to read you all 300 names. We're going to put it up on the screen here, but this is an example of some names. Jay-Z, Beyonce, Steve Bannon, George W. Bush, Bill and Hillary Clinton,
It filled gaps. It turned fragments into narratives. And the fallout exploded overnight. Because when a powerful entertainment titan gets dragged into a file associated with one of the most infamous scandals in modern history, the reaction isn't quiet curiosity. It's chaos. The phrase file storm alone carries weight. It implies receipts. It implies documentation. It implies something tangible, even if the context isn't fully understood yet. And when alleged links surface, the public doesn't wait for full explanations. It reacts to shock first. Clarification comes later. If it comes at all. The Titan built a legacy on dominance, on cultural relevance, on positioning himself as untouchable. For years, criticism slid off like rain. But this feels different. Because this isn't industry rivalry. This isn't business drama.
Someone who has been particularly vocal in response to this letter is Representative Nancy Mace. She went on X, said, quote, "Despite the memo released by DOJ last night, not all the Epstein files have been released, and the excuses provided for not releasing all the files will not hold up in a court of law. This isn't going away until people go to jail." There's another one. "Where are all the logs from the receptionist station at Epstein's New York home? They kept track of underage children and people in power coming and going." Here's another one. "Where is all the audio and video from the Lolita Express," meaning Jeffrey Epstein, jet? Then you had Representative Ro Khanna, quote, "The DOJ is once again purposefully muddying the waters on who was a predator and who was mentioned in an email. To have Janis Joplin, who died when Epstein was 17, in the same list as Larry Nassar, who went to prison for the sexual abuse of hundreds of young women and child pornography, with no clarification of how either was mentioned in the files, is absurd. Release the full file, stop protecting predators, redact only the survivors' names." So why are all of these people listed? And I really want to focus more on names we haven't talked about as much. Like we've already discussed in previous episodes of Sidebar, the Clintons, President Trump, director Woody Allen's connection to Epstein, Elon Musk's back and forth with Epstein or his people regarding meeting up. Actually, I'll tell you what, before I even get to other names, one more thing about Musk that I thought was interesting, and this was outlined in a Fortune article. The files allegedly reveal a scheme by Epstein to get close to Musk's brother, Kimball, and even tried to handpick a woman for him. Like you have this email from an Epstein associate, Boris Nikolic, to Epstein in 2012 that says, "Just talk to Kimball. His actual birthday is on Thursday night, although his party is on Saturday. Kimball, Elon, and few of their closest friends will go out that night. I told him that you will join us as well. Also, I told him that you are coming with redacted and that he might want to ditch his ex or current-to-be. He said yes and is looking so much forward. So please prepare redacted. She might like Elon as well." And then you see how Epstein even tried to seemingly leverage that to get close to Elon Musk, where Epstein wrote Musk in one message, "I will be in New York for next week. We'll see your brother in his new romance." And of course, you have people like Bill Gates, Microsoft's founder, already well established that he had a connection to Epstein. There are photos of him in connection to Epstein. I talked about this in a previous sidebar. It was reported that there was this bizarre email where Epstein alleged that Gates needed medication to treat an STI from having sex with Russian girls. Bill Gates has denied all of this. But anyway, giving an idea about the big names. So what about the other names? Now I'm going to give you the caveat that is laid out by Pam Bondi in her letter. It says, quote, "Names appear in the files released under the acts in a wide variety of contexts. For example, some individuals had extensive direct email contact with Epstein or Maxwell, while other individuals are mentioned only in a portion of a document, including press reporting that on its face is unrelated to the Epstein and Maxwell matters." Like, for example, you might have somebody like Elvis Presley, obviously no connection to Jeffrey Epstein, but then you get a Prince Andrew, who we've, by the way, talked about extensively in another episode of Sidebar where we talked about the royals' connection to Epstein. So that is what I want to provide context and explanation for, because listing these out, people might jump to conclusions, but let me try to explain it. So for example, a name like rock singer Janis Joplin. You know why she's in there? She was referenced in a mass email that BCC'd Jeffrey Epstein, and in the email listed music of the week. Quote, "Janis Joplin, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Piece of My Heart." Seemingly innocuous, although interesting because there appears to be a redacted line underneath this sentence. What about Nirvana's Kurt Cobain? Why is he in there? So in an informational email that was sent to Epstein from popular in your network, info@twitter.com, one of the things.
This is association with a scandal that still carries a dark shadow across politics, entertainment, finance, and global power structures. And when your name appears anywhere near that shadow, even peripherally, the backlash is immediate. Supporters are saying it means nothing. That powerful people cross paths. That proximity doesn't equal participation. That leaked documents often contain names without context. And historically, that's true. Names and files don't automatically mean wrongdoing. But critics aren't interested in nuance. They're interested in patterns. They're asking why certain elites seem to orbit the same controversial spaces. Why the same circles appear repeatedly in scandals tied to secrecy and privilege. And once those questions gain momentum, they don't fade easily. The most explosive part isn't even what's proven. It's what's implied. Implication spreads faster than confirmation. A single alleged link can morph into 1,000 theories.
Things it seems to recommend for him is an article remembering Kurt Cobain on the 22nd anniversary of his death. So as you can see, it's not like Joplin or Cobain were somehow connected to Epstein. Again, wouldn't even make sense given the time frame. And then you have somebody like former President Barack Obama, where from what I could see, it was just a lot of articles about Obama in the files release, like news articles. I didn't find any direct ties between Epstein and the former president. Same kind of thing with Bruce Springsteen. Mentions of him are about tickets and concerts and email blasts. So as you go through this list, and maybe you're going to go on the DOJ's library yourself, just keep that in mind. But what about somebody like actor George Clooney? Now this is interesting because on one hand, you have Clooney mentioned in certain aspects. Like there was an email sent to Jeffrey Epstein in 2011 saying, quote, "Reminder, today is the day Peggy was hoping you could be in Venice with her for the Clooney opening. Pacino to be there," seemingly in reference to Al Pacino. Now Peggy seems to be in reference to Peggy Siegel, big-time publicist, frequent communication with or about Epstein. We mentioned this before, but there was an allegation that she even tried to do damage control for Epstein when all these allegations were coming out. But then you have this email titled Toronto Film Festival, this is back in 2009, from Peggy Siegel to Epstein, where it says, "Had a great time in Toronto, saw everyone, George Clooney, Michael Douglas, Jeffrey Rush, Drew Barrymore, etc. Saw all studio execs, more important." How about this one, from Siegel to Epstein from 2011? "This email to George Clooney gives you an idea how successful my Venice trip was. Accomplished so much. Hung and discussed their work with George Clooney, Kate Winslet, Keira Knightley, Colin Firth, Al Pacino, on and on. We have working on all the hot films. Have to write my story now. Miss you. Want to see you when in New York City. XOXO Peggy." So not really sure what to make of that, unless of course she's just sharing with him her exploits, or he likes being involved or connected to the rich and powerful and wants to make connections, and she might be the conduit. I don't know. But then there's this one we got to talk about. So someone writes Epstein in 2010, quote, "Can I have a muse same as George Clooney? In fact, what about George Clooney?" Epstein writing back, "In your present position, it should be George Clowney." Now at the bottom of the email string, it says Peter Mandelson, somebody we've talked about before, the British politician who came under a lot of fire for emails that surfaced with him and Epstein, particularly celebrating and congratulating him when he was released from prison after his conviction on Florida state charges of solicitation of prostituting a minor. That's a little weird. Then you have this email too from Epstein to someone back in 2014 with the subject line, "Clooney in Copenhagen, quote, now I know Copenhagen has interesting girls. Ask Gianni if you should see agencies on his behalf." This is what Epstein writes back. So I don't know what to make of these Clooney emails per se, but the actor has never been accused or implicated in wrongdoing in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. But obviously I got to mention this. And then you got these notable people that have a more direct connection with Epstein, like actor Chris Tucker. Okay, you have this email from 2013 that reads, "Chris Tucker will be stopping by to see J.E. sometime before his show tonight. No exact time was given." And we already know there were photos of Tucker in connection with Epstein, like there's one with him and Ghislaine Maxwell that has been circulated quite a bit. What about Jay-Z? So Jay-Z presents an interesting one to follow. There is a 2019 FBI crisis intake memo where someone back in July of 2019 apparently called the FBI Operations Center to identify herself as a victim of sexual abuse by Jeffrey Epstein and others. And later on it says, quote, "In approximately 1996, Redacted resided with Redacted in Redacted. An unknown man abducted Redacted from her home when she later awoke in the presence of Harvey Weinstein and Sean Carter, Jay-Z, while Weinstein had, and I'm not going to be too graphic here, sexually abused her. Redacted believed she was in Epstein's mansion in Florida."
Within hours, clips resurface. Old photos get dissected. Past associations get re-examined under a darker lens. And suddenly history looks different. Because when scandal reframes memory, even innocent moments start to look suspicious. That's the psychological power of association. The Titans brand relied heavily on perception, confidence, access, elite positioning. But elite positioning comes with a risk. When scandals involving elite circles explode, anyone perceived as part of that orbit gets pulled into the gravity. And gravity doesn't ask for proof. It pulls regardless. Industry insiders are watching carefully. Not reacting publicly, but distancing subtly. Because even unverified links can damage reputations in today's climate. Brands don't wait for convictions. They wait for public sentiment.
Weinstein, of course, is the disgraced movie producer who was convicted of sex crimes. But I will tell you, this is very similar to a range of tips that authorities were receiving in the wake of Epstein's allegations that were potentially never corroborated. I mean, we discussed the same thing multiple times on previous episodes of Sidebar regarding the unsubstantiated sexual abuse allegations against President Trump, too. Just something to keep in mind. But names like Harvey Weinstein, not a great connection. Neither is Bill Cosby, okay? He, too, is mentioned in the Epstein files. Like this email to Epstein from 2013, quote, Rich Barnett ran into Mr. Cosby's houseman on 71st Street. The houseman said, unfortunately, Mr. Cosby will be out west somewhere in California when you're holding the dinner on the 23rd. Otherwise, he would have loved to come. So this idea that Epstein just loved to be affiliated and associated with the rich and famous, and as we know, Cosby would later be accused and go to trial on sexual assault claims. This one was surprising. Former TV show personality Dr. Oz, who's an official in the current Trump administration. So there is an email from 2016 from Mehmet and Lisa Oz, that's his wife. And now remember, this is after Epstein's conviction on solicitation of prostitution charges of a minor. And this email is to Epstein, and it is actually an invite to Mehmet and Lisa Oz's Valentine's celebration. How about this one? Sent to Epstein in 2010. Rudy Giuliani could see you tomorrow, either at 12 or at 4:45. I'm not sure what time you arrive tomorrow, but I am thinking the 4:45 is better. Again, have to make the caveat. Just because he was invited places or had meetings with places doesn't mean these people are guilty of anything, okay? Why is Robert De Niro listed? Well, Epstein receives an email in 2013 that reads, Hi, Jeffrey. Called redacted, but she never called back. Have been seeing redacted once in a while. Have lots to tell you. Call me when you, I think it says, set up coffee deal with De Niro. Launched in Whole Foods under Grace of Rwanda. Best, Jonathan. So maybe trying to meet Robert De Niro, possibly another De Niro. There are more about the actor, though, too. So you go back to Peggy Siegel. How about this one, 2017, when she wrote, Dear Jeffrey, I am volunteering to help the New York Film Society of Lincoln Center with their spring gala called the 44th Annual Chaplin Awards, honoring Robert De Niro on May 8th. The presenters include Whoopi Goldberg, Meryl Streep, Martin Scorsese, Ben Stiller, and Harvey Keitel. See attached invite. I need to talk to you about the possibility of you buying a table that I can fill with movie stars, and hopefully you can attend. Now, Epstein was also on an email blast from an account that was set up for Jane Rosenthal and Robert De Niro back in 2015 regarding the Tribeca Film Festival, which the actor helped to found. But as you'll see, it's just an example of his connections to powerful people. And while I couldn't find, let's say, a direct email between Robert De Niro and Jeffrey Epstein, let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg for a second, okay? Facebook. How about this message? Quote, Leslie thanks. The things I discussed with Jeffrey were for he and Woody, seemingly Woody Allen, to visit Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook or for Mark to join them at dinner. I've sent Mark the options and I'm waiting to hear back. How about this? Andrea, could you also please pass along the below link to Mark from Jeffrey? Thanks. Again, this is Leslie, Jeffrey Epstein's assistant. How about this one? Here are the details for the Sunday dinner. Attendees are, and it lists out Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Jeffrey Epstein. There are more names on there too. I mentioned Hakeem Jeffries, so getting into the political space. Seems at the very least, Epstein was kind of keeping a careful eye on the Democratic politician out of New York. He was forwarded an article about the rising star in 2013. Epstein also received an email, could be an email blast. It says, Dear Jeffrey, I hope you received an invite to the party that Congressman Hakeem Jeffries this Wednesday night in Manhattan. Comptroller-elect Scott Stringer will be leading the celebrations in what promises to be a great night. Again, didn't find any direct connection or direct email between Hakeem Jeffries and Jeffrey Epstein. What about George Soros?
And public sentiment right now is volatile. Some are calling it guilt by association. Others are calling it exposure of hidden networks. Two completely different interpretations. Both moving at the speed of social media. The Titan hasn't been formally charged in this fictional scenario. No courtroom scene. No indictment. Just documents allegedly surfacing. And that ambiguity is what fuels the storm. Because ambiguity leaves space for imagination. And imagination, during scandal cycles, tends to assume the worst. The public is tired of powerful figures escaping consequences. That frustration creates an atmosphere where any connection to a major scandal triggers instant suspicion. It's less about evidence. More about exhaustion. Exhaustion with privilege. Exhaustion with secrecy. Exhaustion with elite immunity. And when a cultural powerhouse's name appears in leaked material tied to a global scandal, it taps directly into that
I
exhaustion.
said, tell me what's going on. And so that my knowledge of the financial crisis happened with Jimmy, who was at the center of the storm, telling me about what Lehman had gone under, and they were trying to figure out a way, should they bail out Bear Stearns? The question you want to ask is, who was the other call to?
Okay. Who was the other call to?
The other call was to my friend at J.P. Morgan, who was then, I didn't know it at the time, trying to buy Bear Stearns. So at one point, I had two phones. It was difficult because they're afraid people are going to hang themselves with the phone cord. So they don't actually come together and they're pretty short. So I was actually going between two phones talking to Bear Stearns and J.P. Morgan at the same time. So I found it amusing.
And it never struck you about how to end up in a situation like this?
No, that would be probably means I would be too self-aware.
You can't possibly expect me to believe this.
I know. I don't believe it.
It's no, it
Even
can't, it can't be, it can't. You're telling me that and during that day, you never had a moment. You sat there and go, what the have I done with my life that I'm in a 6x9 jail cell when I should be on a trading desk or I should be in my $250 million greatest townhouse in New York City taking calls from the king of Saudi Arabia, the president of China, the head of Russia, the president of the United States to save the world's population from a financial debacle. You honestly expect me to believe that that never happened?
You're suggesting I was somewhat depressed, and how could this happen to me?
I'm not saying depressed. I'm saying a moment of awareness of how could I get myself into this situation.
No, I would just say how strange that this happens. It's strange. I'm wearing a jumpsuit and flip-flops.
What color was the jumpsuit?
Brown. Brown.
Brown jumpsuit.
Yes.
I notice I don't see you in a lot of brown.
No.
Brown jumpsuit and flip-flops.
Flip-flops, yes.
With no access to books, no access to newspapers,
no access to anything.
You had lived on information.
Except my Almond Joy bars. I had extra Almond Joy bars.
Did you eat Almond Joy bars and things like that because you're afraid of what the cooks did to your food?
Yes.
Is that because of that you were in for the crimes that you were in for?
No, it was just in fact, I was.
It was because you're wealthy?
Yes.
How did you know that?
Well, people would constantly come if I was passing by or have to go for my medical. People would either ask to borrow money or make some other types of comments about.
In
the beginning,
what were the comments? At the beginning, what were the comments?
It serves you rich guys right that you're here next to me.
There was nothing about your crimes.
No.
So all this rumor you hear all the time about people in prison that commit the type of crimes you commit, you're saying in your personal thing is not true.
No.
It was all because you were rich.
Yes.
And it was all because they wanted to borrow money.
Or get advice. Yes.
Where they get advice to go long.
Yes,
you're telling me
is this time to buy?
You're telling me in solitary confinement they're interested in going long.
Yeah. They want to know what.
What does that say about human nature?
Well, what I think the people find, one of the reasons they wanted to keep me in solitary confinement was they're afraid that everybody would want to know which stocks to buy.
Yeah, that's right. Epstein claims that those guards were asking him for financial advice. Now, at one point during the interview, Epstein apparently took a break to freshen up his wardrobe.
When did you first start to get nervous, understanding Bill Clinton in all this? Did you change glasses?
Question. The legal team in this fictional narrative is likely moving behind the scenes, evaluating, preparing, crafting statements that emphasize lack of involvement. Because in storms like this, silence can be interpreted as guilt. But speaking too aggressively can amplify attention. It's a delicate balance. And every word will be scrutinized. There's also another layer. Legacy. The Titan's influence spans decades. Music. Business. Mentorship. Philanthropy. Cultural shifts. If alleged links gain traction, all of that gets filtered through a new lens. And once legacy becomes contested, it's hard to restore its original shine. The filestorm represents more than a single controversy. It represents the vulnerability of power in the information age. No matter how carefully curated a public image is, one document leak can destabilize it. Because information doesn't ask permission before spreading. It floods. The disturbing aspect people keep.
Yes.
Okay.
I changed shirt.
I saw that black.
Are you okay with the?
Yeah, great. I think we're gonna have all kinds of changes.
I'm experimenting. Okay.
When did you get a feeling? Did you ever anticipate before it happened something like 2008 could happen?
No.
Bannon keeps coming back to the fact that Epstein, for all of his apparent knowledge of how the world works, he ended up in prison. Although I will say that his attorneys worked out what's been called that sweetheart deal with the then U.S. Attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta, which ended with Epstein avoiding serious federal charges, getting kind of a light sentence for the state charges. And throughout the interview, Bannon seems to kind of needle Epstein, referring to things like the Me Too movement and asking at one point, this was big, whether Epstein is the devil himself.
When you say ownership in the system, it doesn't mean.
Let's start over.
Okay.
Yeah. So flip
Sorry.
over your phone too, because
Yes.
I don't want anyone to see
Yeah.
what's on your phone. So maybe flip it down or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows what the comes up with that phone?
That's correct.
We don't want to send you.
KSA.
I can't not believe I've got the magic moment when you're in prison or jail, wherever the is
It's
in
crazy.
solitary.
Now, there's a funny part to that we missed, which is said.
Go ahead, tell it.
The funny part is just what you asked me.
Is there anything funnier than that?
No, no.
For black humor,
I don't make any black comments. Sorry. You asked me what I was wearing.
That's right. You're too wrapped up in the Me Too movement.
Yes.
I just asked a question. Is your money dirty money?
No, it's not. So, in fact.
Why is it not dirty money?
Because I earned it. A heart.
But you earned it.
I earned it legally.
We went back to this before. You earned
Yes.
it. You earned it, advising the worst people in the world, right? That do enormous bad things, and just to make more money.
So, instead of asking me the question, should you take the money? Because I think it's a legitimate question.
You think it's a legitimate question?
Yes, no
Why?
question. Because I think about, ethics is always a complicated subject, but I can tell you that with the money I gave to help try to eradicate polio in Pakistan and India, instead of asking me whether that money should be given to these children for vaccines, I think you might want to ask their mothers who received the vaccine, who know their child now won't get polio, and ask them if Epstein should have helped these people.
If we
with
walked
their
in,
money.
if we walked in, you're
is
a
that a fair
mathematician. You're a mathematician. If we walked into that clinic where they're giving that money out to these people that are in the most dire straits of poverty and sickness, and told them that the money was coming from class 3 sexual predator?
Tier 1.
Was tier 1's the highest and worst?
No, I'm
The lowest?
I'm the lowest.
You're the
yes.
lowest. Okay, tier 1, you're the lowest. But a criminal.
Yes.
That the money came from them. What percentage of people do you estimate? I understand you don't like probabilities. Do you estimate would say, I don't care, I want the money for my children?
I would say everyone said, I want the money for my children.
Did they know where the money came from?
I think if you told them, if I told them the devil,
100%.
the devil
himself.
The devil himself said, I'm going to exchange some dollars for your child's life.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
It's a serious question.
Sorry.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
Because you have all the attributes. You're incredibly smart. You remember, the devil is somebody
the devil
knows.
smart?
The devil's brilliant. You read Milton's.
Referencing isn't just the file itself. It's the larger scandal attached to it. A scandal synonymous with exploitation, secrecy, and elite protection. Even indirect association feels radioactive. And radiation spreads invisibly. The Titan's past relationships will be examined. Every event attended. Every photo taken. Every private gathering questioned. Were these just social overlaps common among influential figures? Or something more coordinated? That's the debate unfolding online. And debates like this don't stay rational for long. They polarize. One side screams innocence. The other screams accountability. And the truth gets buried under emotional warfare. There's also timing to consider. File releases often happen strategically, during other distractions, or when legal battles elsewhere intensify. Some believe leaks are weapons. Others believe they're transparency tools. Either way, the timing magnifies impact. The entertainment titan is now part of a narrative much bigger than himself. A narrative about elite networks. about hidden dealings, about what really happens behind closed doors in powerful circles. Whether those narratives are accurate or exaggerated doesn't matter in the initial explosion. What matters is perception. And perception right now is unstable. If more alleged links surface, the storm intensifies. If clarifications debunk the connections, skepticism may remain anyway. Because once doubt enters the conversation, it lingers. Even disproven allegations leave residue. The most dangerous element isn't accusation. It's erosion. Erosion of trust. Erosion of brand safety. Erosion of myth. And myths are critical to celebrity power. The Titan built his empire partly on myth. The myth of strategic brilliance. Of calculated dominance. Of control over environment. And through it all, the Titan stands in the center of a narrative he may not fully control. That loss of narrative control is perhaps the biggest consequence. Because once the public writes its own version of events, reclaiming the story becomes nearly impossible. Right now, the situation exists in a gray zone. Alleged links. Unclear context. High emotion. High speculation. Low verified detail. This isn't just about a file. It's about the fragility of power when secrets, real or perceived, enter the light. And the light, once turned on, doesn't switch off easily. The storm is here. The narrative is volatile. And the fallout is still unfolding. Whether it collapses under scrutiny or explodes further depends on what surfaces next. But one thing is certain. The era of unquestioned dominance feels different now. And in the world of influence, feeling different is sometimes the first crack in the foundation.